Every scar you carry is a weapon you don't know how to use yet. The most dangerous people aren't those who never got hurt. They're the ones who learn to weaponize pain. While you're trying to heal what broke you, someone else is turning identical wounds into psychological warfare. Bruce Wayne didn't become the Dark Knight through therapy sessions. He forged trauma into something unbreakable, and that's exactly what separates predators from prey in the real world. What happens when you stop running from your scars? There's something they don't teach you in self-help books. Avoidance makes you weaker, not safer. You think building walls protects you? It just creates blind spots where threats multiply unseen. Look at the intelligence community. CIA operatives who've seen the worst of humanity don't spend decades in therapy trying to forget. They do something far more useful. They catalog every psychological wound like forensic evidence. What did this betrayal teach me about human nature? Which warning signs did I miss? How do I calibrate my instincts now? In the 1960s, researchers studied concentration camp survivors. The ones who thrived afterward weren't those who suppressed memories. They were the ones who integrated trauma into their worldview without letting it consume them. They didn't pretend evil doesn't exist. They became experts at recognizing it early. Power Law 28 is relevant here. Enter action with boldness. But you can't be bold when you're still flinching from old wounds. You need to face them, dissect them, understand their architecture. Not for healing, for intel. Think about scar tissue. When skin heals from deep cuts, that new tissue is tougher than original skin. Your psyche works the same way. Neuroplasticity studies show that processed trauma literally rewires your brain for heightened threat detection and faster crisis response. You're not broken, you're upgraded. But here's where most people fail. They keep the wound open, constantly picking at it, performing their pain for sympathy. That's not strength. That's weaponized victimhood. Real power comes from closing the wound on your terms, keeping the scar as data, not identity. Your first practical action: take your deepest wound and write it as a case study, not a tragedy. Event X occurred. Variables present were Y. Outcomes taught me Z about power dynamics. You just converted emotional baggage into strategic knowledge. Here's what separates the powerful from the permanently damaged. The powerful treat their trauma like a black box recorder from a crash. They extract the data, learn what failed, then use that knowledge for every flight after. The damaged just keep reliving the crash. And there's something even darker about this that connects to why scarred people often win. Why wounded warriors destroy perfect soldiers. Uncomfortable truth. People with processed trauma have competitive advantages over those who've never been broken. Sounds wrong? That's because you're still thinking in fairy tale logic, where good things happen to good people. Harvard Business School tracked Fortune 500 CEOs for 2 decades. The pattern was disturbing. 73% reported significant childhood adversity, not mild disappointment, real trauma, abuse, poverty, loss, violence. But they weren't victims crying in boardrooms. They were apex predators who'd learned to read rooms, detect weakness, and strike without hesitation. Why does Batman outmaneuver Superman consistently? Superman grew up loved, safe, protected. He never had to develop the paranoid hypervigilance that saves lives in real danger. Batman lives in permanent threat assessment mode because he knows, bone deep, that safety is an illusion. He watched that illusion shatter at age 8 in an alley. There's a conspiracy theory about how intelligence agencies specifically recruit people with trauma histories. Whether true or not, there's psychological logic there. Someone who's already survived their world collapsing doesn't freeze when chaos erupts. They recognize it. They've danced with it before. Power Law 17. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. Trauma survivors have this naturally. You've seen the abyss. You don't flinch at uncertainty because you're already intimate with it. While others panic in crisis, you move. Not from courage, from familiarity with discomfort. Angela Duckworth's research on grit revealed something fascinating. The grittiest people aren't those who succeeded easily. They're those who failed brutally, learned from it, and kept moving. Each failure added scar tissue that made them harder to break next time. Your second practical action: List 3 times. Your emotional scars gave you an edge others didn't have. Maybe your trust issues saved you from a con artist. Maybe your abandonment wounds made you self-sufficient when others collapsed. Maybe your experience with betrayal taught you to spot manipulation before it landed. Write them down. See the pattern. Your wounds aren't proof of weakness. They're battle scars, proving you survived. What would destroy softer people? That changes the entire game. But there's a dangerous edge to this. A place where victim becomes villain. So gradually, you don't notice the transition.
How warriors become the monsters they fought. Here's where it gets messy. The gap between I learned from pain and I have permission to inflict pain is razor thin. And most people cross it without realizing. You know those stories about abused kids who become abusers? That's the obvious version. The subtle version is everywhere. The person who was cheated on, who now cheats defensively. The one who was controlled, who now manipulates protectively. The one who was abandoned, who now leaves first strategically. They're not villains in their own stories. They're survivors using their hard-earned knowledge, except they're not. They're just recycling trauma with better vocabulary. Consider the Milgram experiments from the 1960s. People administered what they believed were fatal electric shocks to strangers just because an authority figure told them to. But here's the part they don't emphasize. Participants who'd experienced significant trauma were slightly more likely to refuse. Why? They recognized the pattern of power abuse. They'd been on the receiving end. But flip it. Some of the most compliant shock givers also had trauma histories. They'd internalized that this is how power works. They became what hurt them. Power Law 46 states, never appear too perfect. Your scars make you relatable, human, trustworthy. But when you use them as shields against all accountability, you've become the predator you claim to fight. Just with better PR. Your third practical action is brutal. Identify one time you used your trauma to justify cruelty. Don't lie to yourself. Was it when you sabotaged a genuine connection because everyone leaves anyway? When you hurt someone first because better them than me? When you weaponized your pain to win an argument you should have lost? Write it. Look at it. This isn't weakness. It's radical honesty. It's recognizing that wearing armor doesn't give you the right to stab everyone who approaches. Batman has a code. Even drowning in pain, he doesn't kill. That line matters. Type armor in the comments if you've ever caught yourself using pain as permission. And tell me, what's one wound you're still using as a weapon instead of wisdom? Hit that like button if this made you uncomfortable, because discomfort means growth. Subscribe for more brutal truths nobody wants to hear, because now comes the real test of whether you control your scars or they control you. The difference between protection and prison. Final test. Is your armor protecting you or has it become your cage? Because there's a massive difference between defense and self-imprisonment. Both are made of the same material, but one you can remove when needed. The other welded to your skin years ago. People who've mastered their wounds share one trait: selective vulnerability. They know when to lower defenses. They know with whom. They choose strategically. People imprisoned by wounds only have one setting: permanent combat mode. Even sleeping, they're ready for war. Look at Bethany Hamilton. Shark took her arm at 13 while surfing. She could have used that as a permanent excuse. Instead, she became a professional surfer, competing against people with twice the limbs. But here's the key detail. In interviews, she talks openly about fear, doubt, moments of breaking down. She controls the narrative. The narrative doesn't control her. Research from the University of Pennsylvania found that post-traumatic growth only happens when people maintain what they call psychological flexibility. They integrate the trauma without letting it define their entire identity. They're people who experience something terrible, not walking symptoms of past pain. Power Law 25. Recreate yourself constantly. Your scars are part of you, not all of you. When trauma becomes 100% of your identity, you stopped being a person and became a diagnosis. Your fourth and final practical action. Ask 3 close people honestly. When you look at me, do you see more armor or more humanity? If they say armor, you've crossed the line. If they say humanity, you're balanced. If nobody in your life is close enough to answer that question, then you already know you welded the armor shut. Your emotional scars can be the suit that transforms you into something more than human. But remember, even Batman removes the cowl. Even he has Alfred. Even he allows connection. Real strength isn't never bleeding again. It's knowing you can bleed and still survive. The difference between armor and prison is simple. One you choose to wear, the other you forgot how to remove. Share this with someone who needs to hear that pain can become power, not just a permanent excuse.